The night my son left me at the bus station. I remember the way the wind cut through my coat, how the streetlights flickered on and off as if unsure whether to witness what was happening. I had raised him alone after his father left when he was 5. Every meal, every pair of shoes, every sleepless night had been for him. I worked cleaning offices and houses, saving every bit to make sure he could go to school, to university, to have a life better than mine. And in return, on the day he thought I was holding him back, he took me for a drive, said he needed to make a stop, and left me there, an old suitcase by my feet, no money, no place to go. I stood at that bus station long after his car disappeared, unable to believe that the boy who once held my hand so tightly could let go so easily. The years that followed weren't kind, but they were honest. I found a small room to rent behind a cafe, washing dishes for a few pounds a day. I learned to rely on silence. It never disappointed me. When people asked about family, I smiled and said, "It's just me now." Over time, the pain turned into something softer, like a scar you forget until someone touches it. I stopped waiting for his calls, stopped checking the post for letters that never came. Instead, I began building a quiet life. The cafe owner let me manage the place when he traveled. I started baking, saving, and eventually, I bought the building itself. It wasn't grand, but it was mine. Every brick a reminder that I had survived what was meant to break me. 15 years passed like a long winter. I had gray streaks in my hair, fine lines on my face, but a calmness that only comes from forgiving life itself. I never remarried, never sought sympathy. The world kept turning, and I found peace in small things. Morning tea by the window, the laughter of strangers, the rhythm of my routine. People knew me as the lady who ran the cafe with the warm smile and quiet strength. No one knew the story behind it, and I preferred it that way. Then one rainy evening, as the clock struck 7, I saw a man standing by the door of my cafe. He looked tired, not just from the weather, but from life. His clothes were worn, his eyes hollow. It took me only a moment to recognize him. My son. Older now, but the same eyes, the same uncertain stance. For a second, I couldn't breathe. 15 years of silence collapsed into that single moment. He looked at me as if he were searching for something. Forgiveness, maybe, or familiarity. I didn't rush to speak. I simply watched him, letting him find the courage to say the words he had rehearsed. "Mom," he said finally, his voice cracking under the weight of years. "I need help." Those words, once unthinkable, now hung in the air between us. He told me about the failed marriage, the business that went under, the friends who vanished when money did. He said he'd lost everything, that he had nowhere to go. I listened, not as a mother who had waited for this day, but as a woman who had learned that time changes everything, including love. I could still see the boy who once sat at my table, laughing between bites of toast, but he was buried under layers of arrogance and regret. I invited him to sit, brought him a cup of tea, and watched his hands tremble as he held it. He kept apologizing, his words tumbling over each other, desperate and clumsy. But I didn't need apologies. I had already found peace without them. He looked at me with tears forming and asked if he could stay with me for a while, just until he got back on his feet. I thought of the bus station, the sound of the engine fading, the way the cold seeped into my bones that night. But I also thought of who I had become. Not bitter, not vengeful, just someone who finally understood her own worth. I smiled softly and said, "There's a small hostel 2 streets away. I'll pay for your first week. After that, you'll have to find your own way." His face fell, disbelief written all over it. He had expected anger, maybe shouting or tears. Instead, he found calm finality. I handed him a small envelope with some cash, stood up, and gently touched his shoulder. "You'll be fine," I said quietly, "you're strong. You always were." He looked at me as though realizing for the first time that strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers and walks away. He left without saying another word. I stood at the door watching the rain fall, the same way I had 15 years ago. Only this time, it wasn't me being left behind. It was me choosing to stay, in my peace, in my hard-earned freedom. That night, as I locked up the cafe, I felt no anger, no sadness. Just an odd sense of completion. Life had come full circle. The boy who once abandoned me had learned what it meant to be alone. And I, the mother he thought was weak, had built a life without needing him. Sometimes, justice doesn't come through revenge or cruelty. It comes quietly, wrapped in the dignity of survival. I turned off the lights, glanced at the empty tables, and whispered a thank you, not to him, but to myself, for never giving up when it would have been easier to disappear. People say time heals all wounds. I don't think it does. It simply teaches you which scars are worth keeping. Mine reminded me that love, even when betrayed, can still lead you home. Not to another person, but to yourself. 15 years ago, my son drove away and left me in the dark. Today, I stand in the light, not waiting for anyone, but smiling because I finally understand. Sometimes the best revenge is peace.